Day one of training camp is in the books for your New York Giants. Ed Valentine of Big Blue View here with a day one training camp report. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. So day one, for me, the biggest positive thing on day one for your Giants was the full participation of wide receiver Malik Nabers. Nabers, of course, missed the entire spring portion of practices with a toe issue, something that Brian Daboll said Nabers has been trying to manage since his days at LSU as a college player. Nabers looked good on Wednesday, caught a couple of touchdown passes from Russell Wilson. The Giants did 7-on-7 and 11-on-11 drills in a confined area. They stayed in the red zone on Wednesday, and that's sort of the way that that teams do their early practices of training camp, sometimes OTAs. They do them in the confined area, in the red zone, not only because the work is good and the work in the red zone is important, but because it's a good acclimation. It's a small area. It doesn't require, sprinting in 30 or 40 yard areas. So the Giants did almost all of their work in the red zone. Nabers looked good. He looked comfortable. He spoke to media after practice, said that he feels good, said that he thinks that he and the Giants have a good plan, said that he's been managing the issue pretty well to this point. And Nabers is still a young man, 20, 21, 22 years old, and sometimes when he speaks, exactly what he's trying to convey, I don't think is always exactly what he says. And with that in mind, I wanted to talk about Nabers discussing the idea that surgery on that toe had been discussed. And I think, Nabers said something to the effect of, well, that's not up in the air right now. And I think what he meant was that is really not on the table. It's not under discussion at this point in time. It sounded like Nabers said that he and the Giants had discussed the possibility of surgery, back earlier in the off season, and had decided against it. It's obviously not something Nabers wanted, not something that the Giants doctors anyway, apparently feel is necessary at this point in time. Nabers couldn't guarantee, that the injury, that the toe issue is going to heal completely, and he didn't guarantee that surgery wouldn't have to be on the table at some point in the future, but he did seem to indicate that he thinks he can manage the issue, pretty much the way that he did last year. I mean, I remember seeing him limping around the locker room at times in the middle of the week, but on game days, he was always there. He was always ready. He was always productive. And it never looked like he was limited in any way. So I know that the surgery comment caused a little bit of a firestorm, and people wondered, why is that still on the table now? And why wasn't it taken care of months ago? It sounds like something that the Giants simply decided, and Nabers simply decided wasn't the proper path at this time. It may be sometime down the road. We'll have to see. But for now, Nabers looks healthy. He sounds good. He looked good in practice on Wednesday in the first day of practice, where, as I said, he was a full participant. He was out there with the first team, caught several passes from Russell Wilson, showed no hesitation in matchups with Tay Banks to go up and compete for balls. So all good from Malik Nabers on day one. Second thing I want to talk about is Dexter Lawrence. Lawrence was drafted in the first round by the Giants back in 2019, the Daniel Jones year, the Darius Slayton year. And if you really want to be picky about it, because he and Darius Slayton were selected in the same draft. If you really want to be picky about it, Dexter Lawrence is now the longest tenured New York Giant. That's because he was drafted in round one. He was drafted 2 days ahead of Darius Slayton. And those are the two longest tenured New York Giants at this point in time. And I was listening to Dex talk on Wednesday. I was standing there while Dex was at the podium, and I couldn't help but think about Dexter Lawrence's growth. Dexter Lawrence is not necessarily the face of the Giants franchise. That's Malik Nabers if you want it to be Malik Nabers. That's Russell Wilson if you think it has to be the quarterback. That's Jaxson Dart maybe in the future. But I think that what Dexter Lawrence has become is the voice, the leader, the catalyst. He's the guy that players have to answer to. Partially because he's a 6'4", 6'5", 340-pound man who's looked at by many as the best player in the league at his position. He's an all-pro. He's a great player. And part of that might be the physical stature when I say that people have to answer to him. But Dexter Lawrence has become the standard for the New York Giants in the way that he works, the way that he approaches his job, the effort that he wants to hold his teammates accountable to. Dexter Lawrence wants to win more than he wants any other accolades at this point. In 6 years with the Giants, it's been mostly losing for Dexter Lawrence. It's been one winning season, lots of personal accolades. As I said, many people think he's the best defensive tackle in football, but Dexter wants to win right now. And I couldn't help, as I was listening to him talk, just think about the growth of a young man who didn't say a whole lot in his first couple of years with the Giants. And I remember talking to him, sitting on the side of a wall, outside of the Giants locker room, 2 or 3 years ago, and him telling me how he wanted in the worst way to be great. And he didn't know at that point really what it would take to get there. Defensive line coach Dre Patterson came to the Giants and really helped Dexter Lawrence understand what it was going to take, how he was going to have to hone in on his technique, how he was going to have to work, and help Dexter Lawrence find the greatness that I think Lawrence knew he had within himself, but hadn't yet found. And I just listened to Dexter talk now, and he's willing to call out his teammates. He's willing to say there's a standard we need to meet. He said on Wednesday that he told his teammates that all of the preseason hype about their defense means nothing because they haven't done anything yet. He challenged his teammates to go out there and prove it. He's challenging his teammates to be better every single day. And the growth of Dexter Lawrence, not only as a player, but as a person, as a leader, is something that to me was really, really obvious. And I really enjoyed listening to him speak about it on Wednesday. Honestly, I just hope that the Giants, while Dexter Lawrence is still a Giant, can put together a team that he's proud to play for, can put together a team that wins, that goes to the playoffs. Because I worry at some point, I think Dex is 27 now, he knows that he can't play in the NFL forever, especially at 340, maybe 350 pounds, whatever he is. He knows that although he's in his prime right now, he knows that the clock is ticking on his NFL career, on his greatness. And I know that he doesn't want to waste it playing for teams that win 3 or 4 games every single year. And I worry about the idea that if the Giants continue to spin their wheels and continue to be an awful team, that Dexter Lawrence, who has 2 years left on his contract, will look for an out. Will start to request a trade. Will look for greener pastures and a place where he can go to win football games. We'll see what happens, with that. But for now, very gratified to see the growth in Dexter Lawrence as both a player and a person. And as I said, he's become, for me anyway, the guy who is the standard for the New York Giants, just in terms of what a professional should be and how a guy should work. All right, I can't go any farther without giving you guys a little dose of Jaxson Dart. And I have to start there with the reality that Brian Daboll, who said a half a dozen times probably in the spring, Russell Wilson is our starting quarterback, period. Russell Wilson is our starting quarterback. Russell Wilson is our starting quarterback. Was asked again on Wednesday if there was any way, any possibility that Jaxson Dart could challenge Russell Wilson and take that job as the starting quarterback week 1 against the Washington Commanders. And Daboll again simply said, Russ is our starter. He said, these guys will compete, but Russ is our starter. So there is no quarterback controversy in terms of week 1. There is no quarterback competition in terms of week 1, the season opener against Washington. There is, of course, tremendous interest in the growth, development, performance on a day-to-day basis of Jaxson Dart. He is, of course, a quarterback drafted in round 1, a guy who the Giants hope to put into the starting lineup at some point and have him be their quarterback of the future. They want eventually to put the franchise in his hands and maybe once and for all put the failure of the Daniel Jones era behind them and move on. And hopefully Dart can be for them, what they maybe thought Jones could be and that he never amounted to be. Maybe Dart can be the answer for them for the next 10 years, but that's not going to happen September 7th against the Commanders. Dart had sort of a rough beginning on Wednesday. The Giants did a quick 7-on-7 period, and Dart threw a couple passes in the red zone. One of those was a completion to Cam Scattaboo that technically went for a touchdown, but it was a play that because Dart stood in the pocket and sort of meandered to his left for a while, with no pass rush and just waiting and waiting and waiting, it's a play that in regular game circumstances would never have happened because it simply took too long to develop. But regardless of that, when the Giants moved to 7-on-7, they did 3 different, or 11-on-11, excuse me. They did 3 different 11-on-11 periods on Wednesday. Dart's very first pass of 11-on-11 was intercepted by cornerback Nick Jones and returned 80, 90 yards, whatever it was, for a pick 6. So, that's the bad news. The bad news is that Dart, the first time he throws the ball in training camp in 11-on-11, makes a bad throw and gets picked off. The good news is what Jaxson Dart said to Ian O'Connor of The Athletic in a little private conversation with O'Connor after practice. He said that he didn't misread the coverage. he saw, and I don't know what receiver Dart was throwing the ball to. They were on a field that was far away from media, so I don't know exactly who the intended receiver was. But what Dart told O'Connor was he saw Jones. He simply thought, coming out of Ole Miss, being used to playing against college defensive backs, he thought he could beat Nick Jones, who does have a little bit of NFL experience, I believe, with the Kansas City Chiefs, 9 or 10 games of experience over the last couple of years. He thought he could beat Nick Jones with the throw into a tight window. And what he found out was, no, he couldn't beat that NFL cornerback with that tight window throw. So, the bad news, Jaxson Dart threw an interception. The good news, it's training camp, and Jaxson Dart learned something about the kind of throws he can and cannot make in training camp, or in the NFL against NFL defensive backs. And that is the point of what training camp is about. It is for these players to make their mistakes, to learn what the NFL game is, to learn the speed, to learn what they can and cannot do, what they have to do, what they can't do, and to adjust to playing in the NFL. And I was thinking about Eli Manning as the Giants quarterback for years and years. And I can remember going to training camps for years and watching Eli. And Eli would throw interceptions in training camp. He would throw passes that, if you asked him point blank, at times he would throw passes that he wouldn't throw in games. And, some of those would get picked off. Some of those would get knocked down. And what I came to learn about Eli was he wasn't doing that necessarily because he thought he could complete that ball. He was doing that sometimes to find out about his wide receiver, who was a young wide receiver. Could he trust that guy to go make a catch on a 50-50 ball? Could he trust him if it's a ball that he can't catch? Could he trust him to go knock it down and make sure it didn't get picked off? So he was doing those kinds of things to learn, to gain confidence, trust in his teammates. And I just thought about that. It's not exactly the same as what happened with Jaxson Dart on Wednesday, during practice. But it reminds me that sometimes, that you'd rather make a mistake here. And if you learn from that mistake, Brian Daboll said on Wednesday, he said, the thing that you want with these young players, they'll make more mistakes than veterans. He said, but you don't want these young players to be error repeaters. You want to see that if they make a mistake on Wednesday, they don't make it again on Friday, or they don't make it again, a week later. So what you want to see from Jaxson Dart is, if he's in that same situation with that same play call and that same window, what you want to see from Jaxson Dart is, if he sees that, you want to see him come off of it and go somewhere else. So you want to see him learn from that. And you'd rather have him learn what throws he can and cannot make now in the first week of training camp than in a regular season game where it actually might cost the Giants a victory at some point. So look at the Jaxson Dart interception any way that you want. But for me, it's all right, because he knew what he did. He knew why he did it. And now he knows that simply is a throw that he can't make. All right, Giants fans, the only other quick thing I wanted to mention was that inside linebacker Bobby Okereke, who ended last year on IR with a herniated disc and started practice this spring, but then was pulled back, taken off the field. Good news about Okereke. He was a full participant in practice on Wednesday. So, we'll keep monitoring the Okereke situation, the Okereke status. We'll see if the Giants manage him a little bit. But it looks like Okereke is healthy and good to go. All right, Giants fans, I will be at Quest Diagnostics in East Rutherford again on Thursday. I'll also be there on Friday as the Giants ramp up into the regular routine of training camp. So please, continue to watch for updates here on YouTube and check out bigblueview.com for all of our written content. Today we've got we had live updates from practice. We had a practice report. We had a piece on Dexter Lawrence. We had a piece on Malik Nabers. We had a piece on Brian Daboll talking about Russell Wilson being QB1. We'll continue to give you as much news, opinion, and analysis as we can. So please follow along with us for all of your training camp needs and all of your New York Giants needs. All right, Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there, take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.